So we're just a few weeks away from Wrestlemania 40, the 10-year anniversary of easily what has to be one of the most shocking moments in professional wrestling history. The day the Undertaker Streak was ended. And ever since then, it's honestly kind of felt like a lot of the aura and ambiance surrounding The Undertaker is kind of dissipated to a point where now he's doing Mr. Beast thumbnails on YouTube. Which leads me to ask, without that aura, without the streak, without that ever-looming question of who will be the one in 21 and 1, was it all really worth it? You know, was the sizzle worth the steak? Was The Undertaker actually good? Well, today we're gonna talk about that. So this is usually the part of the video where I give a nice little background into what we're talking about for the younger wrestle babies in attendance to really help them get caught up on this, but it's just The Undertaker didn't lose. That's kind of it. Like, it's pretty obvious, right? It's a streak. It's a streak of wins at WrestleMania every single year. Deadman never lost. That's kind of it. And honestly, it served to be a really nice grounding point for his character. I mean, he was this weird mortician whose soul was trapped inside of an urn before being turned into a biker from hell that loved listening to Limp Bizkit before ultimately turning into an undead zombie cowboy that shot lightning from his fingers. He's kind of always been a bit of a doofy character, to be honest with you, but the streak was something concrete. The streak was something that everybody could understand, whether you enjoyed in-ring work, whether you enjoyed storytelling. The streak was something that everybody could point to and use as evidence that The Undertaker was someone to be taken seriously. But now, without that streak, without the ever-looming threat of the undead Deadman at WrestleMania, it seems like a lot of people have began to turn on The Undertaker. I mean, I've seen far too many hot take posts about how The Undertaker was never good, he was never worth it, and the streak was really all he had, which is honestly a weird thing to hear about one of the marquee players in the WWE for over 3 decades. So today, I aim to figure out if those people are right. Was The Undertaker good? Was he overrated? Well, today we find out by judging him on his magnum opus, the streak. Every single match. And I'll be honest with you, things don't start out great. Because from Taker's first match at WrestleMania 7 with Jimmy Snuka all the way to his match at WrestleMania 12 against Diesel, he wasn't really focusing on in-ring work.
Which was the style at the time.
No, instead, he was more focused on the character that he was portraying. He was more focused on being that unkillable, unstoppable badass that the WWF had presented him as up until that point. And it was up to his opponents to tell the story of what they would do when faced against that immovable object. Jimmy Snuka stuck to his guns, tried everything he knew, and ultimately failed. Jake the Snake Roberts stood like a defiant Ash Williams, looking the evil dead in the face and flipping him the bird, and ultimately fell as well. Meanwhile, Giant Gonzalez just tried to fucking chloroform him, I guess. That was his whole plan, was just chloroform, and it didn't. He got disqualified, so, you know, it didn't work. Honestly, the most fun I had with any of these matches was his bout against Diesel, because at that point, he finally had someone who was truly his equal. Similar heights, similar builds, and it was finally a true test of The Undertaker's abilities. It almost was like a tortoise in the hare situation, with Diesel dominating Undertaker for a majority of the bout before ultimately getting too arrogant, bragging to the crowd instead of worrying about finishing the match, which gave the Deadman the opportunity to rise back up, take down Big Daddy Cool, drop him with a tombstone, and keep the streak going. But beyond that, I honestly didn't enjoy any of these first 5 matches. I mean, the King Kong Bundy match was less of a match and more like a prolonged segment that led to Undertaker's urn being melted down. It was all very new generation WWF, which I'm slowly learning might be my least favorite era of the company. But now we move on to the era where The Undertaker claims his first WrestleMania main event and slowly begins to evolve into that Undertaker character that we all know and love. And unfortunately, that main event does come against Psycho Sid, which it's honestly, it's kind of like the little brother of the Diesel match. Very similar stories being told here of The Undertaker coming face to face with someone of a similar size, a similar build, and seeing how the Deadman handles them. And it was just very slow, very plotting, not a lot of chemistry between these two guys, and it also earns the award for the only streak match that I fully fell asleep in the middle of. Like, at some point, Sid just like grabs Undertaker in a bear hug, and I was just like, Jesus Christ. And then I woke up and Undertaker was the champion. So I literally looked and I was like, well, I guess I could just go back and rewatch the parts that I missed. Anyways, now we move on to one of the matches that are a little bit more synonymous with the Deadman at WrestleMania, as he takes on the devil's favorite demon, his brother himself, Kane. And honestly, if the previous two WrestleMania matches were the story of what happens when The Undertaker faces off against someone of the same size and stature, this was just that, but turned up to 11. This wasn't, hey, what happens when The Undertaker faces someone like him? This was, hey, what if there was a new Undertaker, but he was cool and red and had a mask? Like, that was the whole story of the match. And honestly, I'm sure for the time, with the storytelling and the build-up and all of the lead-in that this match had, people would have enjoyed it quite a bit. But for me personally, after sitting through what was literally the same story like 3 times in a row, I kind of started to get bored with it. All of the build-up and all of the gravitas and all of the lead-up led to a match that ultimately kind of fell flat for me. But honestly, that was kind of the entire Attitude Era summed up right there. A whole lot of build-up and fun storytelling leading to a match that ultimately kind of falls flat. And to be honest with you, the more I watched the streak matches, the more I realized that these matches don't just encapsulate who The Undertaker was at the time. It kind of encapsulates what the WWF was at the time. I mean, the New Generation era was about characters and fun, silly gimmicks, and all of Undertaker's matches during that era were focused on his character and fun, silly gimmicks. Move on to the Attitude Era, that's more about the drama and the sheer controversy and shock and awe that they can raise through their matches. And his matches were about the drama of finding out he had a long-lost brother, or the shock and awe of lynching a man from the top of a Hell in a Cell after burning a cross in his yard. That was, wow, they really did that, huh? They fully burnt a cross in a man's yard and then lynched him from the top of a cage. Wow, you know, I know we're a little bit early on. I don't think I like Undertaker, actually. I mean, at this point, I'm not really sure what they can do to get me back on his side after he did all that.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the WWE's favorite band in the whole world, Limp Bizkit.
Never mind, baby, I'm back in it. Let's fucking go. Keep rolling, 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 rolling. So if the New Generation era was all about character and the Attitude Era was all about drama, the beginnings of the Ruthless Aggression era, to me, seemed to be more about just the sheer grandioseness of events like WrestleMania and SummerSlam. It was less about the characters, less about the storytelling, and a whole lot more about just creating this massive, epic event, which allowed The Undertaker to finally shed his skin, get rid of the Deadman gimmick, and return to us as the American Badass. And you know, early on in my smarky IWC days, a lot of people like to shit on the American Badass character. Like, he was what? He was this mortician, now suddenly he's riding down to the ring on a motorcycle with like Kid Rock and Limp Bizkit blaring. Like, what the fuck was that gimmick? It was badass, that's what it is. If you shout on American Badass, just know you're fucking wrong, you're incorrect. This dude fucking ruled. I only got like 3 WrestleMania matches with him, but badass, American Badass Undertaker, best Undertaker without a doubt. This is my boy right here. The only problem is his matches at Mania during this time kind of began to have diminishing returns. It almost felt like The Undertaker would find a formula that worked and then just milk it every single WrestleMania. Like I said, his first matches were all about an undead badass and what the babyface can do to stop him. Then it became what happens when the undead badass faces off against another tall, muscular badass. And now we move into a series of matches that are more about, quite simply, the spectacle of professional wrestling. These massive brawls around the arena with ref bumps, kickouts, near falls, all of the drama you would expect out of a professional wrestling main event gets slammed into these matches. And it works really well for his bout against Triple H. And then it works a little bit less well for his match against Ric Flair. And then he fights Big Show and A-Train, and holy shit, this is going up on the shelf with like King Kong Bundy and Psycho Sid and Giant Gonzalez of just like worst shit Undertaker ever did at WrestleMania. It was so bad that I think it's the moment they were like, you know what, I think American Badass is done. Because then The Undertaker fucking dies, which is kind of throws a wrench into this whole story because it's like we're only halfway through and the dude's fucking dead. But yeah, Kane buried him alive, killed his brother, got revenge for when Undertaker killed their parents in a house fire. I'm not sure really what the story was fully there, but Kane kills Undertaker. And then from the Royal Rumble towards WrestleMania, Kane begins to get haunted by the memories of his brother before ultimately arriving at WrestleMania 20, where the Deadman rises from the ashes, comes down to the ring, summoned by Paul Bearer, who's just like, you fucked up, son. And then Taker gets in the ring, and all of this was amazing. This shit was so fucking good. Everyone, except for Kane, played their part perfectly. Meanwhile, Kane's over there just like, this motherfucker is not real. And it's just, it doesn't work. And then we get into the match itself. And unfortunately, I'm not judging on storytelling here. I'm judging on match quality. And this match was mid as fuck, because they very quickly drop the whole Kane is looking at a literal dead man story and just kind of start working a normal match. Like Kane is hitting this undead zombie cowboy with a clothesline off the top rope, which like, why? What the fuck are you doing? You need to, honestly, I would have preferred if they did something similar to when Undertaker fought John Cena several years later. Just an immediate violent squash as Kane is forced to pay retribution for his sins of murdering his brother. Instead, they kind of just had a normal match. I really would have preferred if they stuck with the storyline, ignored any like quality in-ring back and forth, and just let the story play out. Like, they focused way too much on the reality, which didn't fit. Like at one point, JR says, The Undertaker's here representing SmackDown. No, he's not, JR. He's fucking dead. That is a dead human being who is a zombie now. He is not representing SmackDown. The Undertaker can't lead a Survivor Series team. He's fucking dead. But now we move into the era where the streak officially becomes like a real thing. You know what I mean? Like, it had been brought up until this point, the whole idea that The Undertaker was undefeated, but now the streak was a goal. It was aspirational. It was something that everyone looked to as a true test of their acumen. Almost all of the top stars during this era got their chance to go up against the Deadman and ultimately would fall. Randy Orton, Batista, Mark Henry, Edge all got their opportunity to take on the Deadman. And this is the era where, in my opinion, Undertaker matches at WrestleMania began to take on a life of their own almost. They became these grandiose tales of brave knights stepping up against a sleeping dragon and watching as they were slain one by one. Randy Orton thought his agility and his youth would bring him victory, but he was quickly put down. Mark Henry thought his size and strength would help topple the dragon, but was quickly slain as well. Edge thought Zack Ryder could lead him to victory, but unfortunately he too fell at the hands of the Deadman. They became became these mythological stories that were bigger than WrestleMania itself. These were where kind of the blueprint for a Undertaker WrestleMania match was written. And unfortunately for me, a lot of these matches, they were great, but they fell flat. Mostly because I knew what was coming next. Now, here's what I'll say about the HBK Undertaker matches, because they are fucking great. Like, make no mistake, they are amazing fucking matches. But these are two competitors who have worked together since literally before I was born. Two individuals who have the respect of not just everyone in the arena, but everyone in the locker room, everyone backstage, like the two most well-respected people in the WWF at the time. One portraying the ultimate embodiment of light, one the ultimate embodiment of darkness, with the biggest streak in professional wrestling on the line. They had so much shit like built up for them that all they had to do was like barely hit the ball and they would hit a home run. And then they did it fucking twice. And it was all because of the little things, the little adjustments that they made to the already existing great blueprint Undertaker had for WrestleMania matches at the time. It was HBK being more tentative in his early approach to The Undertaker, feeling him out before the match could really reach a fever pitch. It was each reversal coming off of a nearly two-decade-long history these two individuals had with one another. It was great sequences like the skin the cat into the tombstone, into the pinfall, into the kick out, into the shot from the crowd. It was all these beautiful little things happening throughout the match. And let me tell you, comparison is the thief of joy, because everyone's like, the second match isn't as good as the first. No, they're just both fucking good. And the second time had the added drama of HBK's career being on the line. These were beautiful matches. And I know I've already talked about it enough. I mean, I've done an entire video on HBK Undertaker 2. Feel free to go watch that. I'll leave that in the comments below. But like, oh, these are my boys. This was, in my opinion, the moment the idea that The Undertaker was a great professional wrestler were born. This is where the icon, the phenom, this is where the true Undertaker was born for me. And then he follows it up with a match against Triple H, which does not, it's, you know, we've already done a video on WrestleMania 27 in that match, and it is, it's not great, I'll be honest with you. It's just so fucking slow and plodding, and it takes the whole Undertaker's getting too old for this, take the dog behind the shed and shoot him storyline, and it just draws it out so fucking long. And it is, honestly, for me, watching them all synonymously, this felt less like a match and more like a stepping stone to get to WrestleMania 28. The Undertaker Triple H rematch inside of Hell in a Cell. The end of an era. And if one thing surprised me more than anything else during my rewatch of the streak, it was watching the end of an era match. Triple H, Undertaker with Shawn Michaels as the official guest referee. It was basically the Avengers Endgame of like the last 5 years of WrestleMania, all building up to this one match. And I'll be honest with you, I think I like it more than the Shawn matches. Like, I got pissed. I was like, no, Shawn's my boy. HBK is my boy. Like, no, it doesn't make sense. But no, this is so good. Once again, thinking back to like everything that the Shawn matches had going for them, building up to those 2 home runs. Add in the history with Triple H. Add in both competitors' history inside Hell in a Cell. It was honestly the true end of an era, with all 3 of those men getting to ride off in the sunset, walking out arm in each other's arm. It was the perfect send-off for all 3 of them at WrestleMania. But then they just kept fucking going, didn't they? They just all kept going after that, huh? No, instead, the streak continues to be defended the next year against CM Punk in what was arguably the match of that WrestleMania, before ultimately arriving at WrestleMania 30 for his match against Brock Lesnar. And I'll be honest, that this match is nothing. If a certain thing doesn't happen at the end of it, this match is literally nothing. The build-up was so poor, especially when you compare it to the previous years. You had Shawn desperately risking everything, including his career, to get that match against The Undertaker. Then you had Taker looking to prove himself once again after being decimated by Triple H, leading to the Hell in a Cell. Then you had CM Punk becoming a literal supervillain, taunting The Undertaker with Paul Bearer's ashes. And then you arrive to just, hey, this is my client Brock Lesnar's really strong and he can beat the shit out of you, and that's it. Like, that's all it really was. There wasn't any massive stakes leading to it, which is why the morning of WrestleMania 30, when I was making match predictions with my dad, I decided to make a fun little joke. Yeah, I think Shield's gonna go over on the New Age Outlaws. Bryan's definitely making it to the main event. I hope he wins. And oh yeah, Brock's definitely beating The Undertaker, right? I said with a sly smile as a big funny goof before we finished our pizza, stood up, and went to the Superdome to watch WrestleMania 30, where I got to see this.
Brock Lesnar into the cover, hooks the leg, the streak is over.
You know, I'm not mad, just disappointed. After like year of banger after banger after Triple H versus Undertaker after banger, the streak ends with a whimper more than anything else, to be honest with you. It's not the worst match he's had at WrestleMania. I mean, King Kong Bundy does still exist after all, but it just felt so slow and so plodding, and like, that's not even their fault. Very early in the bout, Undertaker suffers a concussion, and unfortunately that led to a very poor match that when that F5 hit, and when that 1, 2, 3 rang throughout the Silverdome, brother, the audience didn't really react in true shock and awe. Like I said, we were more upset than anything else. It was more of a feeling of, that's it? It was a quiet, pregnant pause before immediately being interrupted by just massive chants of bullshit. It was the loudest bullshit chant I have ever been a part of. After like a momentary silence, everyone was like, no, that's fucking bullshit. Do it again. Just take the 21-1 off the board. We'll try it again next year. This one didn't count. But unfortunately, our chants couldn't change anything. That 21-1 remained on the board. The audience remained upset, and Brock Lesnar went on to have an entirely too long reign with the WWE Championship. And eventually, Undertaker would come out and say that he felt like the right person to actually end the streak would have been Roman Reigns. And honestly, that's something I agree with. I mean, I was at WrestleMania 33 when the big dog faced off against the Deadman for control of the yard, and after Roman defeated Undertaker and he left his gear in the center of the ring, the audience was emotional. We were crying. I was literally standing outside with people I didn't even know as we all kind of bonded over our histories with The Undertaker. It truly felt like the end of that era, with The Undertaker riding off into the sunset. For me, that was the true end of the streak, and what I felt like should have been the perfect end to The Undertaker's career. But, you know, he had to go on and fight John Cena and fight Goldberg and D-Generation X and AJ Styles. Shit, he just kept going way longer than he needed to, man. Holy shit. So there it is, a little bit of a retrospective, a look back on the streak. I know I didn't individually review matches one by one, mostly because I felt like that would be boring versus just telling the story. Feel free to ask me in the comments below. I'll give you more specifics. I have notes. I just don't want to fucking talk about King Kong Bundy. Anyways, so there it is, and to be honest with you, I know this whole thing started as a retrospective on Undertaker and who he was, but watching the streak, the more I realized that every single match, The Undertaker was never the protagonist. The matches were never about him. he was always the role of the antagonist. I mean, in storytelling, a protagonist, whether good or bad, is the character seeking change, the character attempting to prove himself against the world, with the antagonist playing the role of the unmoving wall in front of them that they have to try to break through. And that's the role The Undertaker played throughout the entire streak. The streak was never about The Undertaker. The streak was always about those that chose to oppose him, those that attempted to take down the streak. It was the ultimate test of if they belonged on the tops of Mount Olympus like Randy Orton, Edge, or Batista, or if they would fall to the wayside like Giant Gonzalez, who now unfortunately is just kind of known as the dude who wrestled Undertaker that one time. It's the ultimate test of a competitor's career. At WrestleMania, The Undertaker is judge, jury, and executioner, and decides if a superstar's soul needs to ascend to the heavens or if they simply need to rest in peace. Ooh, I felt cool there. Kind of like a little badass. All right, so yeah, there it is. My look back at the streak. And yeah, honestly, there were a lot more stinkers than I remembered, but also you got to consider I was raised on the HBK matches, the Triple H matches, the CM Punk match. For me, I hold The Undertaker to a higher standard, which, after watching a lot of these matches, I realized was probably a mistake. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. What was your favorite Undertaker match at WrestleMania? Was it the end of an era? Was it Shawn Michaels? Was it Giant Gonzalez? Let me know down there below. And of course, if you like the video, make sure to like it. If you want more Fight Boys in your feed every week, make sure to hit that subscribe. And most importantly, theys, thems, ladies, and men, never forget that when you're a fight boy, you're a fight boy for life.